A billionaire CEO comes home early and finds her cook with his daughter sitting on her shoulders, laughing and splashing water in the kitchen sink. A sound he hasn't heard in years. But what happened next changed everything. This story will touch your heart and remind you that sometimes the smallest moments can heal the deepest wounds. Marcus Wellington wasn't used to surprises. His life ran like a calendar of precision. Every minute accounted for, every emotion buried. But that day, one unexpected sound broke through the silence of his world. Marcus Wellington was a name whispered in Chicago's boardrooms with equal parts envy and awe. CEO of Wellington Development Group, the man who shaped the city's skyline. A Gold Coast penthouse that touched the clouds. A private helicopter that ferried him between cities like other men caught taxis. A watch on his wrist is worth more than most people's homes. But there was a crack running through the center of his perfect life, one that no amount of money could seal. 2 years ago, on a rain-slicked September night, the Dan Ryan Expressway claimed his wife, Lauren. The crash was instant. There was no hospital room goodbye, no final words, just a phone call that split his world in two. And ever since that terrible night, his 3-year-old daughter, Sophia, hadn't spoken a single word. Not one. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't stubbornness. It was as if her voice had followed her mother into that dark silence, leaving behind only a shell of the bright-eyed girl who used to sing nursery rhymes at breakfast. Marcus tried everything. The most renowned child psychologists in Boston, specialists flown in from London, trauma therapists from Los Angeles who charged $5,000 an hour. He threw money at the problem like a man drowning throws his arms toward the surface. Desperate, frantic, futile. Nothing worked. Sophia remained locked inside herself, staring at the world through those haunted, glassy eyes, as if she were carrying a grief too enormous for such small shoulders.
Before we begin, click subscribe to support our growth and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and you won't want to miss them.
Let's get back to our story. And Marcus? Marcus was drowning. He buried himself in blueprints and acquisition deals, in quarterly reports and 18-hour workdays, because staying home meant confronting that unbearable silence. It meant looking into his daughter's empty eyes and knowing that despite all his power, all his wealth, all his success, he had failed her. He couldn't save Lauren. And now he couldn't save Sophia either. His empire grew taller. His heart grew colder. His home became a mausoleum where grief echoed in marble hallways. Until one Tuesday afternoon in September, 2 years to the month after Lauren's death, when everything changed. Marcus had driven to Milwaukee for a meeting with investors on a waterfront development project. But 20 minutes before the pitch, the lead partner called to reschedule. Equipment delays. Permit issues. Marcus didn't argue. He was exhausted down to his bones. So he turned the car around and headed home early, something he almost never did. The penthouse was quiet when he stepped off the private elevator. Too quiet. Miss Evelyn, the housekeeper, was usually folding linens or preparing dinner at this hour. The cleaning staff moved like ghosts through the rooms. Everything in its place. Everything controlled. Then he heard it. Laughter. High and bright and utterly impossible. Marcus froze, his briefcase still in his hand, his heart suddenly hammering against his ribs. That sound. He hadn't heard it in 2 years. He thought maybe he'd imagined it, some cruel trick of memory. But then it came again, childlike and joyful, echoing from the kitchen. He moved toward it like a man in a trance, his Italian leather shoes silent against the polished floors. When he reached the kitchen doorway, what he saw stopped him cold. His new cook, Aisha, the young woman Miss Evelyn had hired just 3 weeks ago, was standing at the sink washing dishes. But Sophia wasn't sitting quietly at the table with her coloring books like she usually did. She was perched on Aisha's shoulders, her little hands gripping the cook's hair for balance, giggling as water splashed up from the sink. Aisha was singing softly, something about flying high and touching the sky, and Sophia was clapping along, her face bright with a joy Marcus had forgotten she was capable of. For one heartbeat, Marcus felt something break open inside him. Hope, maybe, or relief, or the first crack of light through 2 years of darkness. And then the fear hit him like a fist. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice came out like a thunderclap. Both Aisha and Sophia jolted in shock. Aisha's hands flew to Sophia's legs to steady her as the child nearly slipped. She spun around, her eyes wide with terror, and carefully, so carefully, lifted Sophia down from her shoulders and placed her on the floor. "Mr. Wellington, we were just what?" Marcus's face was burning, his fists clenched at his sides. "Washing dishes with my daughter hanging off you like some kind of circus act? What if she'd fallen? What if she'd hit her head on the counter?" Aisha's voice trembled. "Sir, I promise she was safe. I would never." "You would never what? Let her get hurt? You don't get to decide that." Marcus stepped forward, his voice rising. "You were hired to cook, not to play nanny. You're the cook. That's it. You don't touch my daughter." Sophia started to cry, soft, frightened whimpers that cut through the air like glass. Aisha immediately knelt down in front of her, reaching out instinctively to comfort her. But Marcus grabbed her by the arm and yanked her back. "I said don't touch her." Miss Evelyn came running from the hallway, her face flushed with alarm. "Mr. Wellington, what's going on?" This woman, Marcus spat the words, had Sophia on her shoulders. On her shoulders, Evelyn. While doing dishes. That's reckless. That's dangerous. That's... "Sir, please," Aisha's voice cracked. "I wasn't being careless. She asked me." "She doesn't ask for anything. She doesn't speak." Marcus's voice was ice now. "Don't lie to me to cover your negligence." Miss Evelyn looked between them, her mouth opening and closing, unsure what to say. Marcus turned to her, his jaw set. "Evelyn, have her pack her things. She's fired. I want her out of this house today." "Mr. Wellington." "Today, Evelyn." Aisha stood there frozen, tears streaming down her face. Sophia was still crying, reaching her arms out toward the cook, but Marcus scooped his daughter up and held her against his chest even as she squirmed and pushed him away, turning her face toward the woman who was now walking out of the kitchen, shoulders shaking with sobs. Marcus felt a sharp pain in his chest, something twisting and wrong, but he ignored it. He'd done the right thing. He'd protected Sophia. That's what fathers do. He carried his daughter to her room, but she wouldn't look at him. She just stared at the door, silent as stone. That night, Sophia refused to eat. She wouldn't play with her toys. She wouldn't let him read her a bedtime story. She just sat in the corner of her room, clutching a small rag doll that Aisha had made for her during her first week at the house, a doll Marcus hadn't even noticed before. Over the next few days, Sophia got worse. The nightmares returned, violent, breathless terrors that had her waking up screaming for her mother. During the day, she sat on the kitchen floor by the door where Aisha used to stand, staring at nothing, waiting for someone who would never come back. Marcus tried everything again. New toys. A trip to Navy Pier. A private screening of her favorite movie. Clowns. Magicians. Ice cream for breakfast. Nothing. Sophia was disappearing again, sinking back into that dark, silent place, and Marcus felt the walls of his penthouse closing in on him like a tomb. On the third evening, Miss Evelyn knocked softly on his office door. He looked up from the contract he'd been staring at without reading for the past hour. "Mr. Wellington," she said quietly, stepping inside. With all respect, sir, I think you made a terrible mistake. Marcus blinked at her, too tired to feel offended. What do you mean? Miss Evelyn closed the door behind her and sat down across from him, something she'd never done in 15 years of service. Her eyes were red, as if she'd been crying. Aisha wasn't being reckless, sir. She was giving Sophia something she's needed for 2 years. Evelyn's voice trembled. She was making her happy. For the first time since Mrs. Lauren passed, I saw your daughter smile. Really smile. And you destroyed it. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Evelyn, she could have. She could have fallen, yes. But she didn't. Because Aisha was holding her carefully. I saw it, Mr. Wellington. Evelyn leaned forward, her gaze steady and unflinching. And I saw something else too. Marcus's breath caught. What? I heard Sophia speak. The world seemed to tilt sideways. What? Before you came in, Evelyn said, tears now streaming down her face. Sophia looked up at Aisha and said, I want to see from up high. Those were her first words in 2 years, sir. Her first words. And then you came in shouting, and you broke it. You broke everything. Marcus felt the floor drop out from under him. His hands started shaking. His vision blurred. Why didn't you tell me? Because you didn't want to listen. Evelyn stood up, her voice breaking. You never do. She left him sitting there in the dark, the weight of his mistake pressing down on him like a building collapsing in slow motion. He ran to Aisha's quarters, a small room off the service hallway. He knocked. No answer. He opened the door. Empty. She was gone. And that's when Marcus Wellington, the man who controlled an empire, realized he'd just lost the one thing money could never buy back, the chance to hear his daughter's voice. Now he would have to find Aisha, and he would have to beg. Marcus Wellington stood in the empty doorway of Aisha's former quarters, staring at the bare mattress, the stripped closet, the single-wire hanger swaying slightly from where she must have grabbed her last belongings in a hurry. The room smelled faintly of lavender, her soap maybe, or some cheap lotion. He'd never paid attention before. Now it was all he could smell. He turned and nearly collided with Miss Evelyn in the hallway. Her file? Marcus said, his voice hoarse. Where's her employment file? Evelyn's face was stone. She took it. What? She can't just. She did. Evelyn crossed her arms. And honestly, sir, I don't blame her. Would you leave your address with a man who humiliated you? Marcus felt the words like slap, but he swallowed his pride. The staffing agency. They'll have her information. Already called them, Evelyn said quietly. They said the address she gave was fake. An empty lot on the west side. They're looking into it, but... She paused, her voice breaking. Sir, I don't think she wants to be found. Marcus pushed past her, pulling out his phone as he walked toward his office. His fingers trembled as he dialed the agency again. It rang 4 times before a bored receptionist answered. Wellington Development. I need the complete file on Aisha Thompson. Now, sir, as I told your housekeeper, we're investigating. I don't care what you're investigating. I need an address, a phone number, an emergency contact. Something. We don't have anything, Mr. Wellington. She listed a disconnected number and a false address. We're reviewing our screening protocols. But Marcus ended the call and threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen cracked, useless. He stood there breathing hard, hands braced against his desk, staring at nothing. The man who'd closed billion-dollar deals with a single phone call couldn't find one woman in his own city. That night, he found Sophia exactly where Miss Evelyn said she'd be, sitting on the cold tile floor of the kitchen, in the exact spot where Aisha used to stand at the sink. Her back was against the cabinet, her knees pulled to her chest, and in her small hand she clutched the rag doll, a simple thing made of mismatched fabric scraps, with button eyes and yarn hair. Marcus knelt down beside her. Sophia, sweetheart, come sit at the table. I'll make you something to eat. She didn't look at him, didn't move, just stared at the door like she was waiting for someone to walk through it. She waits for her, Miss Evelyn whispered from the doorway, her voice thick with sorrow. Every day, she sits there and waits. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been holding him together for 2 years. He reached out and gently touched his daughter's hand. Sophia pulled away. He sat back on his heels, helpless. And for the first time since Lauren's funeral, Marcus Wellington cried. Not the silent, dignified tears of a man in a tailored suit at a graveside, but raw, broken sobs that shook his shoulders and left him gasping for air on his kitchen floor. When he finally looked up, Sophia was staring at him. Her eyes were glassy and distant, but she was looking, and in that look, he saw the question she couldn't ask. Why did you send her away? I'm going to fix this, Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. I promise you, baby. I'm going to bring her back. Sophia turned her face away and went back to waiting. By morning, Marcus had hired the best private investigator in Chicago, a man who'd found offshore accounts for divorce lawyers and located runaway teenagers across 3 states. If anyone could find Aisha Thompson, it was him. I need this done fast, Marcus said over the phone, pacing his office at dawn. Money's no object. It never is, the investigator replied dryly. Give me 3 days. It took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of dead ends and false leads. 2 weeks of Marcus checking his phone every 10 minutes, snapping at his assistants, canceling meetings. 2 weeks of Sophia growing thinner and quieter, until Miss Evelyn started leaving meals outside her bedroom door because the girl refused to come downstairs. Then finally the call came. Found her, South Side, rural hose neighborhood. Unfinished apartment building on Cicero and 47th 5th floor, Unit 5C. The investigator paused. Mr. Wellington, it's not a good area. You might want to send someone else. Text me the address. Sir. Marcus hung up. He took his own car, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than every vehicle on the block combined. He didn't call his driver, didn't tell Miss Evelyn where he was going. Just got in and drove south past the glittering downtown skyline, past the gentrified neighborhoods with their coffee shops and boutique gyms, deeper into parts of the city he'd only ever seen from helicopter windows. Boarded up storefronts, graffiti-tagged walls, groups of men standing on corners, watching his car roll past with narrowed eyes. Kids playing basketball on a cracked court with a bent rim and no net. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He'd built half the city, luxury high-rises, mixed-use developments, condos that started at $2 million. But he'd never actually seen it. Not like this. He pulled up in front of a 5-story building that looked like construction had been abandoned mid-project. Concrete walls, exposed rebar, windows covered with plastic sheeting that flapped in the wind. A group of teenagers sitting on the front steps looked up as he got out of the car. Nice ride, one of them said, not smiling. Marcus locked the doors and walked past them, his heart pounding. The stairwell smelled like mildew and something sour he didn't want to identify. There was no elevator, just 5 flights of chipped concrete steps and flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed like dying insects. By the 3rd floor, Marcus was breathing hard. By the 5th, his legs were shaking. He who had a private gym in his penthouse that he hadn't used in 6 months. Unit 5C. The door was dented metal, painted a faded green. He raised his fist and knocked. A long silence. Then footsteps. Light ones. The door cracked open, and a little girl peered out, maybe 8 years old, with cornrows and a patched dress that had been washed so many times the fabric was nearly transparent. Her eyes were sharp and suspicious. Who are you? Marcus swallowed. I'm looking for Aisha. The girl's eyes narrowed further. Why? I need to talk to her. Please. Nia, who is it? A boy's voice from inside. Older, protective. Before the girl could answer, A woman's voice cut through. Nia, step back. And then Aisha appeared in the doorway. She looked different than he remembered. Thinner, tired. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore old jeans and a faded Howard University t-shirt. But her eyes, those eyes that had been so warm and gentle with Sophia, were hard as stone when they landed on him. What do you want? Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. All the speeches he'd rehearsed in the car, all the carefully constructed apologies, they evaporated under her gaze. He forced himself to meet her eyes. I came to apologize. Aisha crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. Behind her, Marcus could see the apartment. A single room with a hot plate, a couch that had seen better decades, and 2 sleeping bags on the floor. The boy, Jamal, the investigator had said, stood protectively beside his sister, glaring at Marcus. Apologize, Aisha repeated, her voice flat. You came all the way here to apologize. Yes. And you think that fixes it? You think showing up at my door makes up for humiliating me in front of your entire staff? For calling me reckless when all I did was make your daughter happy? Marcus flinched. No, I know it doesn't. But his voice cracked. Sophia's worse. She stopped eating. She sits on the kitchen floor all day waiting for you. She won't talk. She won't play. She just waits. Aisha's jaw tightened, and for just a moment, Marcus saw pain flash across her face before she shuddered away. That's not my problem anymore. I know. Marcus took a step closer, and Nia immediately moved in front of Aisha, protective despite her size. He stopped. I know I don't deserve your help. I know I was cruel and wrong, and he choked on words. But she's 3 years old, Aisha, and she's disappearing. Please. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just see her once, so she knows you're okay. So she knows you didn't leave because of her. Aisha stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. You really don't get it, do you? She said quietly. Get what? I didn't leave because of her. I left because of you. She straightened, her voice gaining strength. You treated me like I was nothing, like I was some careless idiot who'd put your child in danger when all I was doing was giving her what she needed. Love and laughter, and a few minutes where she didn't have to carry the weight of her grief alone. Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes. You're right. I was terrified. I've been terrified every single day since Lauren died that I'll lose Sophia too. And when I saw her on your shoulders, all I could see was her falling, getting hurt, me failing her again. So you pushed away the one person who was actually helping her heal? Aisha shook her head. That's not protection, Mr. Wellington. That's fear. And fear doesn't keep anyone safe. It just pushes them away faster. Marcus's shoulders sagged. She was right. About all of it. Please, he whispered. Just once. For her, not for me. Let her see you're okay. Aisha looked back at her siblings. Jamal's protective scowl, Nia's worried frown. Then she looked back at Marcus, and something in her expression softened. Just slightly. Only for her, she said finally. Not for you. For Sophia. Because that little girl doesn't deserve to lose anyone else. Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. I'll come tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. She started to close the door, then paused. And Mr. Wellington, if you ever speak to me the way you did that day again, I will walk out and you will never find me. Are we clear? Crystal. The door closed. Marcus stood in that dim hallway for a long moment, listening to the muffled voices inside. Aisha reassuring her siblings, telling them it would be okay. Then he turned and walked back down those 5 flights of stairs, his legs steadier now despite the exhaustion. For the first time in years, Marcus wasn't chasing a deal or closing a contract or building an empire. He was chasing forgiveness, and he had no idea if he deserved to catch it. The next morning, Marcus was awake before dawn. He'd barely slept, kept checking his phone, afraid Aisha would cancel, afraid she'd change her mind and vanish back into the city sprawl where he couldn't follow. At 6 a.m., he was showering. By 7, he was pacing the penthouse in a pressed shirt and slacks, though he had no meeting scheduled. By 8:30, he was standing at the window overlooking Michigan Avenue, watching the sun climb over Lake Michigan, his coffee untouched and going cold. Miss Evelyn found him there at 8:45. "She'll come," the housekeeper said quietly, though her voice carried its own uncertainty. "And if she doesn't?" Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll figure out what comes next. But have a little faith, Mr. Wellington." At exactly 9 a.m., the doorbell rang. Marcus nearly ran to the door, then forced himself to slow down, to breathe, to not look as desperate as he felt. When he opened it, Aisha stood there in simple jeans and a sweater, her expression guarded but present. She'd come. She'd actually come. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice catching on her name. "Mr. Wellington." Behind him, he heard a gasp. The day staff, 2 housekeepers, and the cook who temporarily replaced Aisha had gathered in the hallway, their eyes wide with surprise. Word traveled fast in the penthouse. They all knew what had happened. They all knew who this woman was. "Good morning, Miss Aisha," Miss Evelyn said warmly, stepping forward with genuine relief in her eyes. "It's good to see you." "You too, Miss Evelyn." Marcus stepped aside to let her in, acutely aware of how she moved carefully, keeping distance between them, her shoulders squared like she was walking into battle rather than home. "Sophia's in the living room," he said softly. "She doesn't know you're coming. I didn't want to get her hopes up in case I didn't show," Aisha finished. "Yes." She nodded once, then walked past him toward the living room, her footsteps quiet on the marble floor. Sophia was sitting on the carpet near the window, that same rag doll clutched in her hands, staring out at nothing. She'd refused breakfast again, refused to change out of her pajamas. Miss Evelyn had finally given up and just sat nearby, pretending to read a magazine while keeping watch over the silent child. Aisha stopped in the doorway. For a moment, she just watched. This little girl who'd been so full of laughter and light just weeks ago, now folded in on herself like a flower closing against the cold. Aisha's throat tightened, but she swallowed hard and stepped into the room. "Sophia?" The girl's head snapped up. She stared, her eyes going wide, like she was seeing a ghost, like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing was real. Then slowly she stood. "Auntie Aisha?" Her voice was small and broken, barely more than a whisper, but it was there. "Yeah, baby," Aisha said, her own voice trembling. "It's me." For one suspended heartbeat, Sophia just stood there, frozen. And then she ran. She sprinted across the room with her arms outstretched, the rag doll falling, forgotten to the floor. She crashed into Aisha's legs with such force that Aisha stumbled backward, catching herself against the doorframe as she dropped to her knees and wrapped the child in her arms. "Auntie Aisha," Sophia sobbed, her small hands fisting in Aisha's sweater. "You came back. You came back. I'm here, sweet girl. I'm here. I thought you were gone forever like Mommy." No, baby. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Aisha held her tighter, rocking slightly, her own tears falling freely now into Sophia's hair. From the hallway, Marcus watched. He'd meant to stay back, to give them space, to not intrude on this moment that wasn't his. But his feet had carried him there anyway, and now he stood just outside the doorway, one hand pressed against the wall to hold himself upright, watching his daughter, his silent, grief-locked daughter, clinging to this woman and speaking and crying and alive again. Miss Evelyn appeared beside him, her own eyes wet. She didn't say anything, just handed him a handkerchief. Marcus took it and pressed it to his face, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs he'd been holding back for what felt like years. "Thank you," he whispered, though he didn't know if he was saying it to Evelyn or to God or to Aisha or to some combination of all three. An hour later, after Sophia had finally calmed down enough to eat half a bowl of oatmeal while sitting in Aisha's lap, Marcus asked to speak with Aisha privately in his office. She settled Sophia with Miss Evelyn and a stack of picture books, then followed him down the hall. When she entered his office, she didn't sit, just stood with her arms crossed, waiting. Marcus closed the door and turned to face her. "I want you to come back," he said. "Permanently. Whatever salary you want. Whatever." "I don't want your money, Mr. Wellington." He stopped. "Then what do you want?" Aisha met his gaze steadily. Respect. The word hung in the air between them. "If I come back," she continued, her voice level and firm, "I'm not coming back as your cook or your maid or some employee you can yell at when you're scared. I'm coming back as Sophia's educator, her nanny, the person responsible for her emotional and developmental well-being. And you'll trust me to do that job the way I know how, with love, with play, with freedom. If you can't do that, then we're done here." Marcus nodded slowly. "Done. What else?" "I dropped out of college when my father died. I was studying early childhood education at Chicago State. I need to finish my degree. If you want me to stay and help Sophia long-term, you pay for my education. And when I graduate, you treat me as a professional educator, not as charity case you're helping out of guilt." "Agreed," Marcus said immediately. "What else?" Aisha hesitated, then pressed forward. "I have 2 siblings. Jamal is 12, Nia is 8. They're in a school where the ceiling leaks, and half the textbooks are older than I am. If you really want to help me, if this is really about making things right, then you help me get them into a good school, somewhere safe, somewhere they can actually learn." Marcus stepped forward. "I'll make the calls today. Private school, full scholarships, whatever they need. Books, uniforms, tutoring, everything." Aisha studied his face, searching for something. "Don't say that because you feel guilty." "I'm not." "Then why?" "Because you're right," Marcus said quietly, "about all of it. I treated you like you were nothing when you were everything my daughter needed. And if I'm asking you to come back and help her heal, then I'm also asking you to let me prove I can be better than the man who humiliated you." Aisha was quiet for a long moment. Then she extended her hand. "Then we have a deal." Marcus shook her hand, holding it perhaps a moment longer than necessary, feeling the weight of the second chance she was offering him settle into his bones. "Thank you," he whispered. "Truly. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Wellington. Thank me when Sophia is laughing every day and sleeping through the night without nightmares. Thank me when she's whole again." "She will be," Marcus said. "With you here, she will be." That night, long after the sun had set over the lake, Marcus found them in the living room. Sophia had fallen asleep in Aisha's lap, her small body finally relaxed, her breathing deep and even. Aisha sat on the couch with her head tipped back, eyes closed, one hand stroking Sophia's hair in an unconscious, gentle rhythm. Miss Evelyn stood beside Marcus in the doorway, watching the scene with a soft smile. "You finally brought life back into this house," she whispered. Marcus shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving the 2 figures on the couch, the broken little girl and the woman who'd somehow made her whole. "No," he said quietly. "She did." And for the first time since Lauren died, Marcus felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Not hope, exactly. He wasn't ready for that word yet, but something close to it, something that felt like the first breath after drowning. That night, Marcus realized redemption doesn't come with power or money or control. It begins with humility, and it grows in the presence of people brave enough to offer grace when you deserve none at all. 3 days after Aisha returned, Marcus called an emergency house meeting. It was a Saturday morning, unusual for staff gatherings, and the request had been delivered with uncharacteristic gentleness by Miss Evelyn. Mr. Wellington would like everyone to meet in the main living room at 10 a.m. It's important. By the time the hour arrived, the entire staff had assembled. Miss Evelyn, the 2-day housekeepers, the weekend cook, the driver, even the building maintenance supervisor who occasionally worked on the penthouse. They stood in a nervous cluster near the windows, exchanging glances, whispering theories. Aisha arrived last, Sophia's hand clasped tightly in hers. She'd been with the child all morning, reading stories and coaxing her through breakfast. When she saw the gathered staff, confusion crossed her face. "What's going on?" she asked Miss Evelyn quietly. "I'm not entirely sure," Evelyn admitted, "but I think it's about to be something important." Marcus entered from his office, dressed simply in slacks and a button-down shirt. No tie, no jacket, no armor of executive power. His face was pale but determined, and his hands trembled slightly as he moved to stand before the group. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice rough. "I know this is unusual, but I needed to say something, and I needed to say it in front of all of you." He paused, his eyes finding Aisha where she stood at the edge of the group, Sophia pressed against her side. "3 weeks ago, I made a terrible mistake in this house. I humiliated someone who didn't deserve it. I yelled at her in front of witnesses. I questioned her integrity and her judgment. I made her feel worthless." His voice cracked. "And I did it because I was afraid and proud and too broken to see that she was giving my daughter the one thing I couldn't, hope." Aisha's eyes widened. Around her, the staff shifted uncomfortably, some looking at the floor, others staring at Marcus in surprise. "I can't take back what I did," Marcus continued. "But if I wronged her publicly, then I need to make this right the same way." He turned fully toward Aisha. "Aisha Thompson, you came into this home and saw a child drowning in grief. While I was busy building empires and hiding in boardrooms, you were doing what I should have been doing, loving my daughter, making her feel safe, giving her permission to laugh again." His voice broke. "You gave her back her voice, and I repaid you with cruelty." Tears were streaming down his face now, and he didn't bother wiping them away. "I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry for the way I treated you. You deserved respect, and I gave you humiliation. You deserved trust, and I gave you suspicion. You deserved gratitude, and I gave you a reason to walk away from a child who needed you." The room was utterly silent except for the sound of someone. Miss Evelyn, maybe, sniffling quietly. And then Marcus did something no one in that room had ever seen a man like him do. He dropped to his knees. The room gasped collectively. One of the housekeepers covered her mouth. The driver's eyes went wide. Sophia whispered, "Daddy?" But Marcus kept his eyes on Aisha, this woman who'd shown him what strength really looked like, kneeling before her on the marble floor of his own penthouse like a penitent seeking absolution. "Please forgive me," he said quietly, "not because I deserve it, but because I need to become the kind of man my daughter can be proud of. And I can't do that unless you give me the chance to prove I've learned from this." Aisha stood frozen, tears spilling down her cheeks. Her hands were shaking. "Mr. Wellington." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Marcus," he corrected gently. "Please, just Marcus." She shook her head, fresh tears falling. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did." He reached out his hand, palm up, an offering and a question. "Do you accept my apology?" For a long moment, Aisha just stared at him. This powerful man on his knees, humbling himself before his own employees, before her. Then she reached down and took his hand. "Get up," she said softly, pulling gently. "Please get up." Marcus rose slowly, and when he was standing, Aisha didn't let go of his hand. "I accept," she whispered, "not because of this grand gesture, but because I've seen you trying, because Sophia needs her father, and she needs him to be whole." She squeezed his hand once, then released it. "So yes, I forgive you." Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. Then Sophia let go of Aisha's skirt and walked slowly toward her father. She looked up at him with those big, solemn eyes that had seen too much grief for someone so small. "Daddy's sorry," she said simply. Marcus dropped down to her level and pulled her into his arms. "Yes, baby. Daddy's so sorry. For everything." "It's okay," Sophia said, patting his back the way children do when they're comforting adults. "Auntie Aisha is here now. We're going to be okay." Behind them, Miss Evelyn was openly crying. The other staff members were wiping their eyes, exchanging looks of astonishment and something that might have been hope. In that moment, something shifted in the penthouse, something intangible but undeniable. The cold, silent mausoleum that had held nothing but grief for 2 years began, finally, to feel like a home again. The days that followed were different. Sophia woke up smiling. She ate breakfast at the table instead of on the floor. She played with her toys again, and her nightmares, while they didn't disappear entirely, became less frequent, less violent. Aisha enrolled in night classes at Chicago State, and Marcus made sure she had everything she needed: textbooks, a laptop, a quiet study space in the penthouse library. He even adjusted her schedule so she could attend lectures without sacrificing time with Sophia. True to his word, he called in favors and wrote checks to get Jamal and Nia enrolled in Lincoln Park Academy, one of the best private schools in the city. Uniforms, supplies, tutoring, he handled it all. And when Aisha tried to thank him, he simply said, "You're keeping your promise to Sophia. I'm keeping mine to you." On a mild afternoon in early October, Aisha suggested they plant something on the penthouse balcony. "Something living," she said to Sophia as they knelt together by the planters. "Something we can take care of and watch grow." "Can we plant roses?" Sophia asked, her eyes bright. Mommy liked roses. Aisha glanced up at Marcus, who'd been standing at the balcony door watching them. He nodded, his throat tight. "Roses are perfect," Aisha said. They drove to a nursery on the north side, all 3 of them together, Marcus at the wheel, while Aisha and Sophia debated which colors to choose. They came home with 6 small rose bushes and spent the afternoon getting dirt under their fingernails, laughing when Sophia accidentally dumped an entire bag of soil on her shoes. As they planted each one, Aisha asked Sophia to name them. "This one's Courage," Sophia said solemnly, patting the soil around a yellow rose. "Good choice. What about this red one?" "Love." "Perfect. And the pink?" "Hope." Marcus helped steady the last plant, a white rose with delicate petals that seemed to glow in the afternoon sun. "What should we call this one?" Aisha asked gently. Sophia looked at her father, then back at the white rose. "Lauren," she said quietly. "For Mommy." Aisha's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "That's beautiful, sweet girl. Your mommy would love that." They watered the roses together as the sun began to set over the lake, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Sophia chattered about which rose would bloom first, her voice animated and alive in a way Marcus had forgotten it could be. That night, after Sophia was asleep and Aisha had left for an evening class, Marcus stood at his office window looking out the balcony. The roses swayed slightly in the breeze, their small shapes dark against the city lights beyond. For the first time in 2 years, he smiled. Not a tight, professional smile for a business associate or a photographer, but a real smile, one that reached his eyes and made his chest feel lighter. Miss Evelyn found him there 20 minutes later, still standing at the window. "She's good for this family," Evelyn said quietly, coming to stand beside him. "She is," Marcus agreed. "And for you." He glanced at her, surprised. Evelyn smiled knowingly. "I've worked in this house for 15 years, Mr. Wellington. I know the difference between gratitude and something more." Marcus looked back out at the roses, at the white one Sophia had named for Lauren, glowing softly in the darkness. "I don't know what it is yet," he admitted, "but she's teaching me things I forgot I needed to learn, about humility, about grace, about how to be present for my daughter instead of hiding behind work. Those are good things to learn, Evelyn said. They are. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city breathe below them. You know, Evelyn said eventually, there's a difference between moving on and moving forward. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? Moving on means leaving the past behind, forgetting, replacing. She gestured toward the balcony. But moving forward means carrying the past with you, learning from it, honoring it, while still choosing to keep living. That's what Sophia is learning from Aisha, and I think it's what you're learning too. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been locked tight since the night Lauren died. I need to go somewhere, he said suddenly. Now, it's almost 9 o'clock. I know, but I need to go. Graceland Cemetery was nearly empty when Marcus arrived. Just a few scattered visitors paying respects in the fading light. He parked near the entrance and walked the familiar path to Lauren's grave, a simple marble headstone beneath an oak tree, engraved with her name and the dates that bookend her too short life. He knelt in the grass, placing his hand on the cold stone. Hi, baby, he whispered. The wind rustled through the oak leaves above him, a sound like breathing. I'm sorry it's been so long. I know you'd understand why, but I still should have come more. He swallowed hard. Sophia's talking again. She's laughing. She's eating and sleeping, and Lauren, she's living again. After 2 years of silence, she found her voice. Tears dripped onto the grass between his knees. There's someone helping us. Her name is Aisha. He paused, searching for words. She's patient and kind, and everything Sophia needed that I couldn't be. She makes our daughter feel safe enough to be a kid again. The wind picked up, colder now. You told me once, remember? Right before his voice broke. You made me promise that if anything happened to you, I wouldn't stop living, that I'd take care of Sophia and keep going and not let grief turn me into a ghost. He pressed his forehead against the marble. I broke that promise. For 2 years, I broke it every single day. I was so lost, Lauren, so angry and scared and broken. I didn't know how to keep living without you. He looked up at the darkening sky, at the first stars beginning to appear. But she showed me, Aisha showed me, that living isn't betraying you. It's honoring you. It's keeping the love you gave us alive by learning to love again, ourselves, each other, the life we still have. The tears came freely now, but they felt different, lighter somehow, like release instead of drowning. Thank you for Sophia. Thank you for the time we had. Thank you for teaching me what love looks like. He touched the headstone one last time. I'm going to keep your promise now. I'm going to keep living. And I'm going to make sure our daughter knows how to live too. He stood slowly, his knees stiff from kneeling. As he walked back toward his car, he felt something shift inside him. A weight he'd been carrying finally settling into a place where he could bear it. Not forgotten, not erased, just carried differently. In learning to kneel before Aisha, he'd learned something more important. He'd learned how to stand again. 3 years passed like pages turning in a book, slowly at first, then with gathering momentum as life found its rhythm again. Aisha graduated magna cum laude from Chicago State University with her degree in early childhood education. Marcus attended the ceremony, sitting in the crowded auditorium with Sophia on one side and Miss Evelyn on the other, applauding so loudly when Aisha's name was called that Sophia giggled and told him to shush. Afterward, in the parking lot, Aisha's siblings threw their arms around her. Jamal, now 15, and towering over his sister, Nia, 12, and wearing her Lincoln Park Academy volleyball uniform. Both of them honor roll students. Both of them thriving. We're so proud of you, Nia whispered, squeezing tight. Couldn't have done it without all of you, Aisha said, looking over her siblings' heads to where Marcus stood with Sophia, giving them space but smiling at her with something warm and complicated in his eyes. 6 months later, Marcus did something he'd been planning in secret for over a year. He sold his shares in 2 of Wellington Development's largest subsidiary projects, luxury high-rises he no longer had the stomach for, and used the money to purchase a renovated community center on Chicago's South Side, the same neighborhood where he'd once climbed 5 flights of stairs to beg for forgiveness. He called it the New Beginning Foundation. It was an educational center for underprivileged children, built on Aisha's teaching philosophy, that every child deserves to be seen, to be heard, to be given space to heal and grow. There were bright classrooms with books lining the walls, a community garden where kids could plant vegetables and flowers, art studios, a music room, and a counseling center staffed by trauma specialists. Aisha had designed the curriculum herself. Marcus had simply made it possible. The grand opening was held on a crisp Saturday in October, exactly 3 years after that first afternoon when Aisha had planted roses with Sophia on the penthouse balcony. Local news cameras showed up. City council members gave speeches. Parents from the neighborhood toured the facilities with tears in their eyes, hardly believing this place was real, was free, was for them. But Marcus barely heard any of it. He stood at the edge of the crowd watching Aisha give a tour to a group of mothers, explaining how the after-school program would work, how they'd provide meals and tutoring and emotional support. She wore a simple navy dress and her hair was pulled back, and she glowed with purpose. This woman who'd once lived in an unfinished building and was now shaping the future of hundreds of children. Sophia tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, you're staring." He looked down at his daughter, 6 years old now, bright-eyed and confident, wearing the rose print dress she'd picked out herself. "Was I?" She grinned knowingly. "You always do." "Smart girl." "I know." She squeezed his hand. "You should tell her." Marcus's heart skipped. "Tell her what?" "That you love her." Sophia said it matter-of-factly, like she was telling him the sky was blue. "Miss Evelyn says you've been in love with her for 2 years, but you're too scared to say it." "Miss Evelyn talks too much." "Miss Evelyn is right," Sophia countered. Then she let go of his hand and skipped off toward Jamal and Nia, who were setting up refreshment tables, leaving Marcus standing alone with his daughters, words ringing in his ears. "You should tell her." Hours later, after the guests had left and the catering had been packed away and the sun was beginning its slow descent toward the lake, Marcus found Aisha standing alone in the foundation's garden. She'd kicked off her heels and was walking barefoot through the grass, looking at the roses they'd planted earlier that summer. Dozens of them now in every color, each one named by a child who'd come through their doors. Courage, strength, joy, dreams. "You did something incredible today," Marcus said quietly as he approached. Aisha turned, smiling. "We did. None of this would exist without you. It exists because of you. I just wrote the checks." "Don't diminish what you've done, Marcus." She started calling him by his first name about a year ago, and he still felt something warm spread through his chest every time she said it. "You could have rebuilt your towers and made more millions. Instead, you built this. For kids who need it. That matters." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. The city sounds distant and muted beyond the garden walls. "Aisha," Marcus said, his voice suddenly unsteady. "Can I show you something?" "Of course." He led her to the far corner of the garden where 2 rose bushes had been planted side by side, slightly separated from the others. One was white with delicate petals that seemed to glow in the fading light. The other was deep red, its blooms full and vibrant. Small plaques had been placed in front of each. The white rose, Lauren. The red rose, Aisha. Aisha's breath caught. "Marcus, you didn't have to." "I needed to," he said quietly, "because I need to tell you something, and I've been too afraid for too long." She turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his. Marcus took a breath, gathering courage the way Sophia did before jumping off the high dive. "I love you, Aisha." The words hung in the air between them, simple and terrifying and true. "I don't mean that I'm grateful, though I am. I don't mean I appreciate what you've done for Sophia, though I do. He stepped closer. I'm in love with you, with your strength and your grace and the way you make me want to be better, with how you laugh at Sophia's terrible jokes and how you cry at sappy movies and how you take your coffee with too much sugar and not enough cream. Aisha's eyes were brimming with tears. Marcus, I know the history is complicated. I know I was your employer once, and I know there's a power dynamic that makes this. He struggled for words. I know it's messy, but I also know that somewhere along the way, you stopped working for me and started being the person I couldn't imagine my life without. I'm scared, Aisha whispered. Of what? Of this being gratitude you're mistaking for love. Of crossing a line we can't uncross. Of hurting Sophia if it doesn't work out. Her voice broke. Of not being enough for a man like you. Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. You've never not been enough. You were enough the day you made my daughter laugh. You were enough when you stood in that terrible apartment and demanded respect instead of money. You were enough every single day when you chose to come back and help us heal. His thumbs brushed away her tears. You didn't work for me, Aisha. You saved me. She closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling over. I love you too, she breathed. I've loved you for so long I can't even remember when it started. Maybe that day you knelt in front of everyone. Maybe before that. I don't know, but I'm terrified. Then be terrified with me, Marcus whispered, but be terrified together. And he kissed her, softly at first, tentative and careful, like they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But then Aisha's hands came up to grip his shirt and Marcus pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home after a long journey through darkness. Behind them, the sun dipped toward Lake Michigan, sending golden light flaring through the rose petals, illuminating the garden in shades of amber and rose and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Aisha laughed, surprised and breathless and free. Sophia's going to be insufferable about this. She's been telling me for months that you were in love with me. Marcus groaned. She told me the same thing this afternoon. That child is too perceptive for her own good. She gets it from you. Aisha smiled, then rested her forehead against his. So what now? Now, Marcus said, we figure out together. One day at a time. Like everything else we've survived. Together? Aisha echoed, and kissed him again as the Chicago skyline began to light up behind them. 5 years later, Sophia Wellington, now 11 years old, led a small group of children through the Foundation's expanded garden. In her arms, she carried her baby brother, 6-month-old Marcus Wellington Jr., named after his father, but already being called MJ by everyone who loved him. This is where we plant roses, Sophia explained to the wide-eyed second graders clustered around her. Each one has a name. We plant them when something good happens or when we want to remember someone special. A little girl with pigtails raised her hand. What are they called? Sophia smiled and began pointing them out. That yellow one is courage. The pink one is hope. The white one over there is love. And that tall red one is dreams. Who plants them? Another child asked. We all do. Kids who come here, teachers, parents, anyone who wants to plant something beautiful. She adjusted MJ in her arms, and he gurgled happily, grabbing at her hair. My mommy Lauren taught my daddy about roses a long time ago. She said every rose should have a name because names give things meaning. Is she here? The pigtailed girl asked, looking around. Sophia's expression grew soft. No, sweetie. She's in heaven. She died when I was really little. Oh. The girl's face fell. That's sad. It was, Sophia agreed. But then my mommy Aisha came, and she taught us how to keep growing roses. She said that planting them was a way to remember the people we love and the feelings we don't want to forget. One of the boys frowned, confused. Wait, you have two mommies? Sophia looked down at her baby brother, then back at the children with a smile that was wise beyond her years. Yes, the first gave me life. The second taught me how to live. From across the garden, Marcus and Aisha stood watching, his arm around her waist, her head resting on his shoulder. Miss Evelyn, retired now, but still a fixture at family gatherings, stood beside them, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "She's so much like you," Marcus murmured to Aisha. "She's like both of us," Aisha corrected. "And like Lauren. She carries all of us with her. That's a lot for one kid. She's strong enough." They watched as Sophia finished her tour, and the children scattered to play on the lawn, their laughter carrying on the breeze. MJ had fallen asleep in his sister's arms, and Sophia sat down carefully on a bench, rocking him gently the way she'd seen Aisha do 1,000 times. "Did you ever imagine this?" Aisha asked quietly. "When you first hired me to cook?" Marcus laughed softly. "No, I didn't imagine anything beyond getting through the next day without falling apart." He turned to look at her, this woman who'd rebuilt his life with patience and love. "But now I can't imagine anything else." Good answer. I've learned from the best. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and lavender, the wind picked up and rustled through the rose garden. The flowers swayed together, yellow and red and white and pink, a symphony of color and life. At the front of the garden, 2 roses grew side by side, their branches intertwined now, after years of growing together. The white rose marked Lauren, the red rose marked Aisha, and between them, a small bronze plaque had been placed, engraved with words that Sophia had chosen. "True love never dies. It just changes form." The camera pulled back slowly, past the roses, past the children playing, past Marcus and Aisha watching their family grow, past the foundation that would serve thousands of children in the years to come, until the entire Chicago skyline came into view, its lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. A city of millions, and in the heart of it, one family that had learned what it meant to lose everything and find it again, not in wealth or power or control, but in the quiet revolutionary act of loving again. Every story we tell carries a piece of truth about loss, hope, and what it means to love again. Subscribe now and keep walking with us through stories that remind us all how beautiful change can be. Don't forget to share this story and tell us in the comments, what does second chances mean to you? We bring forgotten voices to life, stories that remind us that healing is possible, that grace exists, and that love is always worth the risk. Thank you for watching. Your week will be blessed with courage, hope, and new beginnings.